I'm looking over at our YouTube camera video here, and I'm seeing about half of our guest. he's, yeah, he's. We've been moving cameras around this morning, so but you'll still be able to hear him. Don Hall joining us from the Twin Falls City Council in the studio with us for a few minutes this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. And of course, we used to call you Mayor Don Hall, and there's been a reshuffling, I guess,
There
of
has
and so the council selects a new mayor when we go through this. Sean was
every two
selected,
years.
and
Every two
and so
years.
but your role is the same. You still vote and you do all of those things and debate and get involved with all of
Yeah,
that.
again, we have a city manager form of government, so the mayor is somewhat of a figurehead. I mean, there are some authority, some responsibilities that they have over the other. It's a lot more work, I'll tell you that, and there's a lot more expectations. But we all vote. We're all seven equals when it comes to voting and making decisions.
You had a lot going on at the meeting the last couple of weeks, and we have a story, in fact, on our website this morning. And I know you know a little bit about water that you didn't know about before you got into politics.
Yes.
That would be one of those stories. Some
Yeah,
changes coming.
yeah, absolutely. I think this is fascinating to me, and this has been kind of a passion of mine the last few years, especially when we had that power outage where we lost our Blue Lake wells, and we actually had to call industry that day. It was a few years ago, and say shut down because we don't have enough water. We're starting to go through that. But since then, obviously, we've been able to build a new tank, very sizable tank over on the Hankins area. But what we discussed the other night was the water facility plan, and it's a planning document that we put together every so many years. And I'm a believer in planning. You should have strategic plans and comprehensive plans and water facility plans and those kind of things so that we can project out what the community will need. And water's pretty important. Okay, it's important for life.
See, this
For
is the thing. People, it may not sound as it's not as exciting and entertaining an issue as reverse parking, which was a minor thing,
Yes, yes.
in the grand scheme of all of this. But this is a desert, and so water here is important.
Well, it's important just for quality of life. Obviously, it's important for fire safety. You have to have certain water flows in case
Hmm.
there's a fire, so the fire department has access to that. Industry, all these things, and really, this plan gives us an indication of where our infrastructure is, what the needs are, and of course, I will just tell you the needs are far outweigh anything we can afford. In the horizon, but it's a plan that we can start chipping away at, and we've worked diligently towards this. I think one of the biggest illustrations that we saw the other night was the dependency that we truly have on the Harrison tank. That is like the lifeblood. That's where we pump the water up from the Blue Lake wells, and then we distribute it from there out to our south wells and the tanks out there so that we can mitigate the arsenic issues. Okay, and then distribute it through the system. And it's an aging infrastructure. That tank is over 60 years old now. So we need to be doing some planning and looking on the horizon when we need to make some of these changes. And yeah, water is the lifeblood of this community.
People are going to probably ask if they get an interest in this in any way about cost, and I guess making sure we have that water is not going to come for free.
It's not, and we've made great strides of securing more senior water rights and pristine springs and all these things. But when it comes right down to it, still there's a cost of moving that water around and getting it from point A to point B. We had to go through the arsenic compliance a few years ago, and that cost the community a lot of money. Actually, it's on every one of our water bills every month, 11
Hmm.
something a month, I think it is. And that's so that we can comply with that. But the positive side of doing that, and there's some debate about the parts per billion and all those kind of things. But the positive side is that it did make us more efficient. It gave us more redundancy in the system that we could move water around, and the efficiency really of the pumping system. We have a very efficient, low power usage in the scheme of things system that we didn't have before it. It made some positive changes.
I was talking to one of my radio peers the other day, and he's in the Joaquin Valley in California, and was talking about some of the severe water issues that they have. And of course, there's the battle between you got multiple big cities in the spine of the valley. You've got farms, ranches, and then you've got people as well who'd like to pump water into the San Francisco Bay just because they feel it's better for the fish. And he simply said, "There's just not enough," and we're
There's
trying to make sure we avoid that.
Well, we are, and the other thing that is very, very dramatic is the lowering of the aquifer every year. We see it; it's going down every year, and we need to look at that. And really, the major thing that we need to do as a community, in my humble opinion, is plan for more storage and all those kind of things. But we need to continue our movement towards conservation, and that might mean someday that we're going to be doing more scaping and incentivizing that and those kind of things because there's a limited amount of water. And I kind of equated it to the federal budget. Okay,
Hmm.
federal budget, we're out of money, but we keep spending. There's going to be a day of reckoning because of that. It's coming. It's inevitable. It's the same thing with our water. There's a day of reckoning when we're going to run out of water. So we need to start working and working wisely towards a better usage of it.
Now, Steve Millington was mentioning yesterday the state is coming forward with some plans too. Can you work, with the state putting something together here because they're looking as well at this and realizing we've got to have something with a population growth uh, because, as you say, there's not going to be necessarily a lot more water.
Right, right. There's some ideas out there, and about recharge of the aquifer and things like that on the state level that I think is very, very positive, and that can help mitigate things for the future. But in the long run, we live in a desert. Okay, we have very low annual precipitation because we live in a desert. So we need to use the resources we have extremely wisely.
We have a telephone caller with us, and caller, you're on the air with Don Hall on KLIX.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Hey, have you guys looked into primary water? Primary water, from what I understand, is different from secondary water, which comes from the aquifer and anything from that up into the atmosphere. Primary water is created constantly by the earth and comes up as, natural springs, artesian. Why don't we fill our aquifer with that rather than dirty canal water, pollute the aquifer?
I'm definitely no expert when it comes to these issues. I can certainly reach out and ask those questions. My first question would be, what is the source and how much is that source to be able to recharge? But I can certainly look into that.
That's a good question. Caller, is there do we have enough springs to actually do that?
Absolutely. The earth creates water. God designed it that way. The heat, oxygen, and hydrogen are compressed with the molten heat down below, and it comes up everywhere. There's veins everywhere of fresh, clean water, enough for the whole world 10 times over. It's just got to be tapped into. And I think the politics are blocking that and creating all sorts of issues, problems that don't need to exist.
Well, thank you for the call. He mentioned tapping into it. I guess there's the expense. There's the rub. It's actually, if it's there, how available it actually is or how easily you can get it. It's a bit like oil, right? It's not always easy to get. There's a lot of it there, but sometimes you just can't pull it out of the ground.
Sure, and again, I'm no water engineer to know where these springs are and the like. I do know that our major source of
I think they're
water
in
is
Nebraska, but that's
okay.
Sorry,
but
we'll
but
put
but
you
our
on the
major
spot.
source of clean potable water is the aquifer.
And California is doing recycling, right there, and we may be able someday to pick up on that.
Well, yeah, there's some recycling ideas, and obviously there's also the idea of treating the river water, the canal water again. We did that back
Hmm.
in the '60s, but I'm telling you, there are people that were around then, still around, said we will never go back there because it's extremely expensive and difficult to do.
We have another caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Yes, I would like to know how many gallons of water are produced by the city of Twin Falls every day as wastewater, and why that is not being utilized. This was a question I asked 5 years ago before the new wastewater treatment plant was started down in the canyon. That water should always stay on top of the rim and be recycled, if nothing more, for irrigation.
Well, let's get to the number. Is there a number? I mean,
Yeah, there's a number. I don't have that in front of me, but it's several million gallons a day, and it has to go through a treatment center to be able to even be put back into the water. We've got some innovative things that we're doing with it down in Auger Falls and making wetlands and things like that. But when it comes right down to it, it has to be treated. And it's very, very expensive to treat wastewater, and to get it to a level that the state, the EPA, Department of Water Resources, says that it has to be, and to be able to continue to use it within our system to recycle it for. I mean, this is unappealing, but drinking water, things like that, extremely expensive and not very appealing.
Right. And in other words, we probably wouldn't want to drink it, but it would go toward agricultural uses, lawns and things like that.
Certainly, I mean, there is some chances of that, but I will tell you that the infrastructure to be able to do those things, millions and millions of dollars.
We have another caller with us. It's 917. Don Hall is our guest from the Twin Falls City Council. Caller, you're up next on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Yeah, I've always been curious. How do they figure who's going to take the load whenever it comes to doing these new projects and stuff, water projects or whatever? How do they decide who takes the burden? When you're talking about new building, new construction, why don't they just increase the permitting cost? Because I know a lot of elderly people. I deal with them on a daily basis, and every time a tax levy comes up or whatever, it affects them in a huge way, disproportionately, and they're not getting anything out of it. And I've always wondered why they don't put the burden on a factory or the individual building permits or the developers for residential areas. Why do they not take most of the burden?
Well, I would argue that they do. If you look at some of the infrastructure that we've been able to do, for example, on the east end of our community, the new water tank, the new water lines, things like that, we would not have been able to put that infrastructure in if it wasn't for the new industry coming in. That we were slated to make some changes out there so that we could open some more area up for development, but we were looking at 20, 30, 40 years down the road to be able to do it with the current tax base and the fee structure. But they came in, and because of their growth and because of the tax base there, we were able to do those things early. So I would argue that they do. Growth does as much as we can pay for growth.
We want to thank you for coming by today. And, question, I mean, from just a standpoint, we got about 30 seconds. These callers bring up a lot of interesting points. Come to a meeting and talk about it, right?
Absolutely. We had a meeting. Please pay attention to our website and what we're going to be discussing. We had the experts there the other night that walked us through this new water facilities plan, and we always open. If there's people in the community that want to ask questions about what we're being presented, we always open that up because we want to, we want to hear from our constituents. That's Monday what we're paid afternoons. To do. We are elected to represent you, so we want to hear from you.
We'll see you again in a couple of months. We may actually see you beforehand, but in another role. But I probably can't mention that right now, but that'll be coming up too.
Very good. Thank you,
Bill. Thank you. Don Hall joining us from the Twin Falls City Council this morning. It's 20 minutes after 9:47 right now. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com.